Welcome back to episode 16 of Steeler Thoughts and Chief Feelings. I'm your co host, Chris, and I'm the Steelers fan and philosophy professor in the group here.
And I'm your other co-host, Ajay, and I'm the Chiefs fan and psychiatrist in the group here. We want to thank everybody that watches, that listens on whatever podcasting app you use, or that follows along on social media. We're on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, all of them with the handle at STCF715.
Yes, memorable. And to follow up, before I forget on last week's discussion, we were looking for a punishment that Ajay would have to do if Aaron Rodgers beats Mahomes in the playoffs this year. Um, and our so we have a double level punishment. So if Aaron Rodgers wins a playoff game, Ajay is going to smash his face into a cake. I have a note recording all these things just so we have a note called punishments. Uh, and the second one is if Aaron Rodgers beats Mahomes in the playoffs, then Ajay is going to, we decided, eat the spiciest pepper in the world on the live broadcast. Um, we'll have to figure out at that time what the spiciest pepper in the world is. Probably this is not going to happen anyway, but we have that to, or the viewers can hope so, right?
I don't even care from the pepper side. I just don't want the Chiefs to lose in the playoff.
Yeah, that's right. Pepper is like, yeah, whatever. I do think just to keep the punishments roughly even, I'm going to need. I think so. I have if Pat Fryermuth is a first or second team All Pro, I smash my face in the cake. I think I will. Like maybe I need a two-tiered system too. So if it's second team All Pro, is the cake, and if it's first team All Pro, maybe I'll do the spiciest pepper or come up with something else too. So if you have a punishment that you would like to come up with for me at that first tier level,
or I feel like the first tier level, we should come up with an even more unlikely All Pro on the team.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, someone that's maybe not even on the team right now, like Patrick Peterson, who may end up being on the team. But if I make the bet before then.
What about like Troy Fautanu? Like if he becomes an All-Pro in his rookie season.
Okay. Yeah. Well.
Is that more or less likely than Pat Fryermuth? That's a good debate to have. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. I don't know. You could make the case for either one. It's not a strong case, either way.
But do you think Pat Fryermuth making second team All Pro is as likely as Aaron Rodgers winning a playoff game? Maybe not.
No, it seems less likely.
Yeah,
significantly.
I mean,
by the way, we should
really
also go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say it's showing how low I am on the Jets this year that I'm comparing these two things. I feel like.
Yeah, I think I need a more realistic scenario that would generate the punishment for me. We'll keep an eye out for them. It'll probably it'll come up in conversation. But I should clarify that your punishments don't stack, right? So if the Jets win one playoff game, if Rodgers wins one playoff game and it's against the Chiefs, you don't have to do both. Right, it's just.
Oh, really? I was assuming I would. Oh, okay.
Okay, you can do both at the same time. Actually, that would be awesome.
I have to take it in and then smash it. Okay, that's fine.
I mean, it's up to you, but I was assuming they were mutually exclusive. Well, I was assuming that they were not satisfied by the same event. But I guess you could win two playoff games, one being against the Chiefs, and then you would have to do both. Anyway. Okay. Well, let's say that they can be both satisfied. That's awesome. All right. Yeah, we'll keep an eye out for more because this is fun. I'm gonna look forward. It's gonna make me cheer for some things that I wouldn't be cheering for now.
Yeah, I feel like we should just have tons of bets like this through the season. It'll make the whole season entertaining. Like. Yeah. We need to come up with something if, like, the Cardinals play the Seahawks and we don't actually care about the game. We need to come up with some, like, punishment, and then we'll be very invested.
Oh, yeah. That could get interesting. This is it's like fantasy football, except
Higher
it's
stakes, I'd
only
say.
yeah. I'd say that's right. That's high stakes. Okay. Well, I think you said you had some things to follow up on. Is that right?
Yeah, we have a couple things. One from our last episode. I don't even remember, honestly, in hindsight, how we got there, but we somehow got to a point where we were having a discussion about whether it was okay to root for multiple teams. I think we started by saying you had to have a logic in rooting for teams. I was expressing my frustration with people that root for a team when they have no connection to the team. But somehow we got to the point where we were talking about whether it's okay to root for multiple teams, and we ended up making a short about it and posted the video to TikTok and got a lot of commentary. And so I wanted to just revisit some of the TikTok commentary that we got about this idea. For those of you that don't recall or didn't see last episode or the short on our social media, the basic premise is we're asking the question whether you can root for multiple teams in one sport, and the majority of the short is me explaining why I think you cannot if they have the potential of playing each other. And then at the very end, we kind of clarify, which I think is an important point, which is that one can cheer for as many teams as one wants. It's just about claiming a team is what we're really talking about when we're talking about rooting for a team. Basically, when they win a championship, for you to feel like your team won a championship, there can only be one team in every situation that you feel that way. That was what I was saying. So the first category of comment I wanted to talk about were the people that have slightly different views on the actual rule. So one person said only if they're in opposite conferences. One person said, yes, as long as they're in different conferences. I root for my parents' college team and my own, even though we could play each other. One person said, yes, always have a backup team in the other league. Root for Philly, and if not them, Pittsburgh. And then one person said, as long as they aren't rivals, it's chill. And that person, I love it when people, well, I shouldn't say I love it, but people on TikTok will seemingly intentionally try to antagonize someone. So this guy says, as long as they're not rivals, it's fine. And then he gets a reply from someone being like, I root for the Cubs and Cardinals. And so this guy's trying to agree with him. And he's basically like, oh, yeah, I like multiple teams too. And he's like, no, but the Cubs and Cardinals are big rivals, clearly trying to instigate him. I thought that interaction was very funny. So, yeah, there are some people that were just of that category of being they have slightly different rules. Whereas we were kind of talking about how we feel like it's if they could play each other, then you can't claim both of them. This different conferences thing came up a lot, so maybe we can discuss that further after going through.
I mean, should we pick up on that? I mean, that's a curious. But do you want to go with the rest of the categories, or do you want to discuss that now?
We can go to the rest of the categories just because none of them I think will spark discussion like this one.
Okay, this is a curious one, but yeah, we'll come back to it.
Then the next category were people that I think generally agreed with us. Some of them understood exactly what we were saying, and some maybe didn't. So, for example, one person said, I love the Nuggets, but I live in New England. I root for both, and when they face each other, I root for Denver. So to me, that's Denver's your favorite team. He actually clarified this further to agree with us. I don't claim the Celts championships, though, LOL. I also wore all Nuggets gear when I went to TD Garden and they played each other. So I think he's saying what we're saying. It's the Celtics are his team, right? And, he likes the Nuggets in a way that I like the Steelers, but ultimately, when they win a title, it's not his title, which I feel like is fine.
Right. When push comes to shove, and the Steelers and the Chiefs play, we are on opposite sides. And we have been there.
Yeah. And someone said you can like multiple teams, but you can only have one favorite team, which, again, I think was the same. This is another person that I feel like kind of fundamentally agrees with us. I grew up in Madison, but went to Colorado. I cheer for the Buffs and the Badgers, but if they ever played each other, I'd wear red and cheered hard against Dion. So he's a Wisconsin fan, Yeah. He's a Wisconsin fan who also likes Colorado, which I feel like is fine. And then another person, one team has my allegiance, multiple have my support. Again, I think that is kind of what we're getting at. The idea that like you are able to wish well for as many teams as you want to, but I feel like it starts to get meaningless when you're claiming the titles or like, you know, I don't even know how to say this without making. I feel like the more I say this, the more it just opens a window into how stupid we are as sports fans. Because like, why are we claiming a title of a team anyway? But we do. That's part of the conceit. And so it's like, you can only basically like have any sort of air of superiority or feel any, feel like your team won a title with one team, I guess.
Yeah,
And then category.
yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, that's good.
Category number 3 were the people that just think this idea is stupid. So someone said, "You can do ... whatever you want?" ? And I do. The thing I found funny is 2 of the people that took this tact got really funny replies in the comments. So this guy says you can do whatever you want, and someone replied to this person, and so can the people mocking you when you're 15 wins the championship. Like, yeah, that's true. And the other funny comment was along those lines. So someone said, "Gatekeeping fans 101. Let people root for whoever they want, LOL." And this person, again, got a similar reply. "And let people make fun of you for having 6 ride or die teams."
Yeah, I mean, we should be upfront. Like, this is all right, really arbitrary in some respect, but it is like there. I don't know. One feels out the rules here, and there are definite. Like, I think if you have to, like the 2 conferences thing. Let's get back to that because that's really interesting to me. You can have a favorite team in each conference. Is that the suggestion?
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, what happens if they play each other, or what happens if they play each other in the Super? Like, I feel like if you have to deliberate about who to cheer for, you're not on the level of fandom that we're talking about, right? There's no deliberation when the Chiefs play the Steelers for either of us about who we cheer for. Uh,
It's like
I
the,
think that's
the like training
yeah,
camp battle thing. If you have 2 quarterbacks, you have 0 quarterbacks. If there's a
yeah,
quarterback composition.
yeah, yeah. You're not. It's like somehow you're identifying with the team, and if you're identifying with it, there's no. It's like you don't have to think about which one to pick in the competition. So I don't know. You can be a fan however you want to be a fan, sure, but I guess don't claim the titles. We'll claim. I'll claim the Steelers titles. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Right? Uh,
Well,
but
this is a good
yeah,
point, actually, because I think it kind of gets. Because the question becomes, like, practically, why does anyone care, right? And I think practically, what really, when it comes up, is when fans are discussing things with each other, right? Like, if you, as a Bengals fan, want to give me crap because the Bengals beat the Chiefs, then I don't want to hear you also giving people crap because the Packers did something. You can do that with one team, And I think that's when it comes, like when you're talking about fan discourse and you're comparing your teams and you're, attending a championship parade and being proud that your team won. Like, I feel like you do that for one team.
yeah. Now this raises the question of whether, like, I don't really engage in much fan discourse. Like, I don't trash talk, or I guess I take it. Like, sometimes my uncle will trash talk to me, and then I just like reply very kindly. It's like, yes, you deserve to win. uh, but he's a Ravens fan, by the way. But
My condolences.
actually, I was thinking about this recently. The Ravens, I should give them. I mean, it's pretty cool that they are named after a poem by Edgar Allan. I mean, that's just cool, right? Like, it
That's
takes
true.
some guts to name your team after a poem, and they did it, and they really leaned in, and more power to them. Right? I feel like I'm impressed. It would be to name yourself after like a Grecian urn or something like that. We should have a team with like the Grecian urns, right? Isn't there
Well, I
an
guess
ode,
in that
ode to a
sense,
Grecian urn? I'm making that up.
yeah, yeah, yeah. How do you compare that to naming yourself after a mythological character like Buffalo Bills?
I don't like it as much. The Buffalo Bill. Yeah, no, I don't know. I think a poem just seems so out of place in the sports world, and then to just lean in and do it, I think is cool.
Well, I shouldn't even say mythological because like Buffalo Bill was a real person, right? But
Oh,
there
is he?
is mythology surrounding Buffalo Bill. It's like he's like Davy Crockett, like someone whose like story has well exceeded anyone's actual knowledge of what he did.
Is Paul Bunyan like that too, or is Paul Bunyan mythological?
I think Paul Bunyan actually did not exist, but don't quote me on that. Yeah, I don't think Paul Bunyan is based on a real person
Okay.
at all.
Um, well,
But if you know better than us, please tell us in the comments because here we are speculating about things that are out of our depths.
yeah. Um, I forgot where we were though. Yeah, no. So, does this matter as much as if you don't engage in like much fan discourse? I still think it does, because I still think it's like a sort of identity kind of thing. Um, at least, I mean, right? Again, you can be a fan however you want to be a fan. Something seems off about just being happy no matter who wins, right? Like if no
It's
matter
like
who wins the Super Bowl, would you be happy? If the answer is yes, then I don't understand your fandom. If
Well,
you're
I
just a fan of the
actually
game,
would. I would psychologically disagree with that because, like, part of an emotion is based relatively to other emotions, right? So if you're doing something all the time that you call happy, like happy then starts to lose its meaning. Like, what is happy?
hmm,
You have to like have some level of like neutral in order to really feel the happy, right? If you were happy all the time, then would it really be happy?
I don't know. Yeah, this is. I mean, couldn't you imagine someone that's just like constantly overjoyed by everything?
Well, they might
They
end up
might
in a
look it.
psychiatric unit.
Yeah, yeah, that's right.
Like,
Yeah, but it seems imagined. I don't know. Yeah,
because I feel like a lot of things in life get their meaning because of what they mean relative to other things. You know, another example that maybe isn't quite as related. I remember when I was in residency, residents had a habit of putting all the patients on fall precautions. And I remember one attending saying, if everyone's on fall precautions, no one's on fall precautions because the term just stops having any meaning to any of the staff. Like, the term is supposed to be for you taking particular care because someone's at risk of falling. But if you're taking the same care you take with every patient all the time, then what does that even mean anymore?
yeah. I mean, in general, I'm sympathetic to this. I guess there's like two ways of. I mean, I feel like there's two ways of approaching the question. One is uh, imagine if we were all always happy, or what we imagine, like you know what I'm like when I'm happy. Like if I was always like that, if everyone was always like that, we would not call that happy anymore. We would distinguish. It would be a useless term, right? We would just make different distinctions with the term if we used it at all. Uh, that seems right, but it also there's also like the empirical question: could someone just be like that? Just take me when I'm happy and just imagine my whole life that way. It does seem like an empirical possibility that someone could be like that. Now, whether we would call that happiness if we got there, I guess is a good question.
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know enough to know the answer to that question, but I would actually guess that maybe one couldn't be like that. Unless there was something like what we would term disordered or like neurodivergent. I don't know that one who. I think some people are much better than other people at being positive and viewing things positively, but even those people still get sad and angry. I feel like it's one of those things where it's not so clear to me that all other emotions are as pathological as society wants them to seem. Like, honestly, a lot of the reason that people come in and see a psychiatrist is that they like think they should never be anxious. And it's like, no, it's actually normal to be anxious. So if you didn't get anxious, it's not like anxiety is protective to a certain level, and so are all of your other emotions. So I don't know that it's healthy to be happy all the time, and I don't know if we're designed to be that way.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think maybe I am, as the philosopher, just throwing out more of the background assumptions about human nature here, right? Like,
Oh, I see.
is it possible, given the laws of nature, that someone is always happy? And I think, sure, right? They always could be smiling and just overjoyed, right, or whatever. Uh, but yeah, so given more assumptions about human nature and about our psychology, I guess it's hard to imagine a realistic case that doesn't count as uh, somehow, having some sort of disorder. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
right. Anyway, how did we get on this?
Because we were talking about would you
Oh
be
yeah,
happy if every team won the Super Bowl? Um, like any team beats any team and you're thrilled about it.
yeah. I mean that. I think that's just a fan of the game, right? At that point, you're not.
But I would I think there's a difference between appreciation for a sport and happiness that your team's winning. I think there are a lot of people that can be dispassionate during games and just appreciate and be in awe of great performance. And I somewhat envy those people sometimes because I think I'm less likely than most to do that. I always have some particular reason why I want one team to win a game. It's very rare that I'm watching a game and I'm like, I do not care at all who wins this game. And I can just sit back and enjoy the beauty of the game. It is very hard for me. But I find some reason to get upset with one team or like one team more, and then
Yeah.
you just start getting more biased in how you view the game. But I think there are people that can do that and that then again will appreciate every game. But you still don't know that. Like the feeling when your team wins the Super Bowl that's just different. Like that's a different feeling.
Yes, I think that's right. If you, again, be a fan however you want to be a fan, but there are certain experiences that you will not have if you don't have one ultimate team that you engage with, that you cheer for. I think that's right.
And I think from the standpoint, the reason why I bring it back to discourse and stuff is that if you are living that life and you are doing it in isolation, obviously nobody's going to care because nobody knows. But when you start trying to talk to other fans about oh yeah, we won the Super Bowl, and it's all right, well, who's we? You can be oh, that Packers won the Super Bowl and I was a Packers fan, and then the Broncos won the Super Bowl. So I've got to see 2 Super Bowl wins and all that, and it's just no, you haven't. You get to have one. I feel like that's when it really comes out, is when people are talking to other people.
Yeah, that's believable. Okay. Anything else that you wanted to follow up on from last time, or have we exhausted the question of multiple fandoms? I mean,
I'm sure
feels
we'll
like there's more
have
to dig
opportunity.
up here.
Yeah, I'm sure this will come up again. This won't be the last time that you all have to listen to us talk about this. But I did want to bring up because we talked about Steven Nelson several episodes ago because he was a Chief and a Steeler, and he is now retired. So, first of all, thank you for your 4 years of time with the Chiefs.
And however many you were with the Steelers, I don't really remember.
This is a memorable time.
Yeah.
But I mean, his exit was not so meaningful to Chiefs fans, and he made a really big deal of being upset with the Chiefs when he left about the scheme, and which I think was actually a little merited. Bob Sutton was kind of letting our corners hang out to dry at times. But he also was really big on happy that he was in a new organization when he went to the Steelers. But there was a Chiefs beat writer named Nate Taylor. He's a Chiefs beat writer for The Athletic, who was talking about how Steven Nelson, during his contract year when he ultimately ended up leaving, he apparently refused to talk to Nate Taylor until he got paid. And I don't know what the context was. He was just he just said, until I get that bag, I'm not talking to you. And he was okay. And he said that once he signed with the Steelers, he messaged Steven Nelson and was hope you're enjoying that bag. But kind of further evidence that Steven Nelson just was he was a personality, it seems. And people that were in the locker room seem to have picked up on that as well. Not just us that sit and make opinions about him from home.
Yeah. No, he definitely seems to He seemed to take things very personally, um, and that, as a lot of professional athletes do, as we've discussed, but maybe even more personally than usual for professional athletes. Um, yeah, I think he played 2 seasons for the Steelers. I think I looked it
Okay.
up after we discussed, and I had like basically no memory of him, um, which is odd because I do remember remembering him. Like I remember thinking about him and talking about, it, but it's like I cannot summon basically images of his playing time. It's very strange. Um,
If I remember correctly, too, wasn't he like cut after 2 seasons? It wasn't even
yeah,
like his contract right now. I think he got cut.
yeah, and he was mad about how he got cut. I think, but I guess that's Steven Nelson. Um, all right.
Do we
Well,
want? Do
should
we
we get
have?
into some? Yeah,
Yeah,
go ahead.
let's get some questions. We don't have a ton of time, so I'm thinking about before our first break. I'm thinking about maybe doing a somewhat shorter question.
Okay, sure.
Um, we might have to carry this through the break anyway. I don't know if this will be short enough, but I can give you one Steelers question to get started.
Okay,
Um,
yeah, sounds good.
so this actually isn't really a Steelers question, but it's in the division. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what we think about Joe Burrow's offseason because, he had that wrist injury quite a while ago now. And apparently during like OTAs, he was still taking some days off. And then I don't know if you saw that press conference or any quotes where he was literally used the phrase like contemplate, or I don't know the full phrase, but he used the phrase football mortality. Like he was basically saying that like the string of injuries he's had made him think about his football mortality. And I don't know, it would be something I'd be a little scared hearing my quarterback say that, like especially right after we paid him. And
Yeah, yeah,
him being that young, I thought it's interesting that it seems like this wrist injury is not something where he's like, all right, I'm ready to go. Like, let's play in camp. Like, it seems to be lingering for him.
it does seem like that. He had a quote. A lot of this I've just gotten secondhand, but there was some quote he had about it never being 100% pain free or whatever. Shouldn't it be by now? I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
like this is I can move my wrist without pain, so uh, you would hope that the quarterback you're paying this much money could do that as well. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think as a Bengals fan, I would be worried definitely. I mean, it could just be like he's idiosyncratic and how much he like and how open he is about his injuries or whatever. I don't know if he has a history of that or not, but uh, I guess bracketing that ignorance, yeah, I would be worried. um, as a Steelers fan, I'm not so worried. I guess I do feel like it would be unfortunate for his career to be cut short by a wrist injury or something like that. Um, but our division is tough anyway. So if the Bengals are if they go back to being the Bungles, then that's good news as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I was also thinking about like it might ultimately backfire. We were speculating about the Chiefs Bengals game being put in week 2 because like they want the premier quarterback matchups
Mm,
to happen early so that people aren't injured, and then maybe Burrow, if this is a lingering injury, and maybe he feels better by week 8, and they got the Chiefs Bengals game in week 2, and he's not 100%. It might actually backfire.
yeah. Yeah. I mean that's possible. It's the NFL. It would like it almost seems more likely because the NFL often makes stupid decisions like this. So if that was their reasoning, and then yeah, it's likely it's going to back. Um, but I don't know. I mean, what is? And I guess this raises a sort of tangential question here. But like, how do you feel about injuries to rival quarterbacks in your division, say, that are important quarterbacks, like that are hard to play against? Like, do you do you feel bad? Do you take some modicum of joy in them? Like, what's the appropriate fan reaction to this kind of thing?
I definitely feel bad. I think it's because I have experienced quarterback injury in my time, and it's just like when your quarterback's out, like the season's just not as fun. Like it's not, and especially now, I feel like I feel bad because as much as I, find other teams formidable, like I feel good about my guy going up in a matchup against their guy. So, and it's nice to just rack up wins against other quarterbacks. Especially we got
Yeah.
to even the series with Burrow. Like if Burrow retires, then everyone's gonna be like Burrow was 3-1 against Mahomes in his entire career, and I'm gonna have to hear that forever. So I do feel. I mean, I can't pretend like you don't feel a little bit of relief. Like you don't have to play a good player, and you feel more likely that you're gonna win, and you feel more likely that you might win the division. So like there is that, but I don't want it to happen. I do feel bad as much as I'm happy to reap the benefits if it does happen.
Yeah, I think that's how I where I land too. I think the right, you certainly will take the easier win or the easier game. Um, if you still lose, then it's extra embarrassing. And
Yeah.
if you, I mean, the I guess the it takes a little bit of luster off the win, right?
Yeah.
And like this is something that like in reflecting on Ben's career, like the only times we got to the Super Bowl were when someone else took out the Patriots or the Patriots took out themselves, right? And that's a little, it's like, it would have been nice to beat them in the playoffs, right? Never did that. And so you never felt like definitely we're the best team because probably would have lost to them in the playoffs had we played. I mean, we did that several times too. So I don't know. That's the kind of thing where I, well, I wouldn't give up the Super Bowl win certainly, but I do wish we had. I wish we had beaten the Patriots in the playoffs.
Yeah. All right.
Well,
Well,
we have to take a break, I think.
yeah. Let's take a break, and we might revisit some of this in a moment. And we're back. Um, all right. So the next Steelers question, I wanted to talk about Cam Sutton and everything surrounding him. Just as like a recap for the viewers and listeners that may not be like up on it completely. And Chris, you can correct me because I'm not going to pretend to be completely up on it. But Cam Sutton played last year for the Lions, and I believe sometime in March there was a like domestic disturbance, and he was at least accused of domestic violence, and was fairly quickly cut by the Lions. What I do recall is at that time or soon after, I think Steelers reporters asked Mike Tomlin, like, "Are you gonna talk to him?" Being a former player, and I think Tomlin said something to the effect of like, "Yeah, I do. Like, all the people that we know, try to reach out and help people and do whatever." And the reason why I remember this is because then they asked him what he would say to Cam Sutton, and he said, "It's none of your business." um, and then a little bit later in the offseason, the Steelers signed Cam Sutton, and now recently Cam Sutton has been given a suspension for the first 8 weeks of this season. So just wanted to know your thoughts, any other details that you feel like are pertinent about Cam Sutton.
Um, well, I guess I don't know. You can. I think I struggled to know how much to believe this kind of thing, but a number of former teammates of his, I think, and reporters had talked about how surprising the charges, like the story was essentially about the domestic violence issue, um, and I know that like before we signed him, we had him out, and I think Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan both talked with him for a while. And I guess whatever they talked about made them comfortable signing him. It's hard to know. I sort of maybe unduly trust Mike Tomlin and his judgment about players. So I guess I would, insofar as Mike Tomlin is okay with having him on the team, I guess I'm okay with having him on the team. But who knows if it's a good general policy for me to follow. But yeah, in terms of the sort of on the field impact, I have to think that we were expecting some suspension of, you know,
Yeah.
comparable length. Maybe not. Maybe they were expecting slight. Who knows? But I got to think that we were planning for something like this, right? And then the question is, okay, so like, do we have ways of sort of plugging the gap for the first 8 games before he gets back? I mean, it does make the whole situation more complicated, right? He's gonna have to come back and then, you know, I guess get thrust into playing action right away. I mean, it's hard to know, how we'll handle that. Um, like if things are going well, do you even play him at that point? And how effective would he be if you did? All sorts of questions there that I don't know exactly what the answers ought to be. I do think it again brings Patrick Pearson back into the conversation as maybe a stopgap for earlier in the season. Um, he did kind of like transition to that role last year. And I don't know how successful he was, but he's a player with a lot of experience that's got a high football IQ, I think, and so he would be an option there. I don't. I mean, I guess right. My trying to read between the lines of signing Cam Sutton in the first place, knowing that there was a suspension coming, which I think he's not appealing, which is, I guess, an interesting point. I don't know what to make of it. Um, but like, what is our plan with? I mean, like, why would you want him for the latter half of the season? I guess. I mean, if he's going to make your team better, great. If you're thinking that's like for the stretch run, do we think we're going to be that good? Like, I personally don't, but whatever. Like maybe so. We do have, as we talked about, a lot of high leverage divisional games, basically all of the divisional games in the second half of the season. So having Cam Sutton, then maybe they're thinking that'll be helpful. I don't actually. It would be interesting to know. I'm pretty sure we signed him before our schedule came out, but I'm not sure. So maybe there was some thinking there about he could be helpful for these divisional games or whatnot. But um, yeah, I don't know. Those are my musings that don't go in a particular direction. Um, but those are a couple different narratives you might try to pick up on here. Like maybe we think we're going to be in it I mean, I guess we probably do. Like, doesn't every team think they're going to be in it in this stretch run? So maybe that's just not news. But yeah, I don't know. I think I'm a little puzzled about why we thought he would be a good idea to sign at this point. I don't
I,
know.
I'm
Yeah, what does it look like from your perspective?
to me, and maybe I fall even more in the camp of placing a lot of faith into Mike Tomlin, but I I got the impression with the signing that obviously they thought he would help the team, like that it's football first and foremost, but I do wonder how much of it was like Tomlin. I think Tomlin really cares about his players, and I think he saw someone who he believed in, and then that person left and made a what seems like a terrible choice and did something bad. And I wonder if Tomlin is like, this is an environment that can get him on a good path, and that I'm sure. Like I said, I think the primary priority is I think he'll help the football team. But I really do feel like bringing him back into this fold was obviously meeting a need. Like there is a secondary need, but also my gut instinct is that I think that Tomlin feels like he can provide an environment that can continue whatever he saw in Cam Sutton before he went to Detroit.
Yeah, yeah, that's a perspective on how Tomlin sees his role, uh, which is pretty cool. Well, and it would not be surprising if he saw his role somewhat like that as a, I mean, and his as a sort of life guidance, source of guidance, as it were.
Yeah.
Not the only one, um, but a lot of his former players have talked about how good he was at life giving life advice. So
And
yeah, he really thinks of himself as doing something like that.
And I think like along those lines, like not necessarily completely just in the life sphere of this, like also in the football sphere, there seem to be players that just like mean more to certain teams than to other teams. Like for the Chiefs, I think I would put like McCole Hardman in this group. Like he went to New York and couldn't do anything, and he came back to Kansas City, and now we've re-signed him again this year. Like clearly, he's more valuable to us than he is to other teams. And I wonder if Cam Sutton is that kind of guy for the Steelers. Like the Steelers like him; they feel like he contributes to them, whether that be in the locker room, on the field, or some combination. They feel like they help him, he helps them, and for whatever reason, maybe he doesn't. And of course, like, I don't know, maybe they were feeling that way in Detroit too until this incident. But you do wonder, there do seem to be situations where players just mean more to one team than to everyone else.
Yeah, and I guess that's right. And what does that meaning more amount to? In one sense, it could be their personality fits in and they have like a good role in the locker room, but also, maybe their play fits in too, and there's a need for them at that position. Certainly, we do have a need at the slot corner, so so he fills that need. Yeah, and there's probably like a comfortability of having him. Well, I don't know. It's less comfortable now that you have this domestic violence incident, but I'm presuming like you're thinking that you know who he is and knowing what you're going to get when you sign him. So I don't know. There's been other cases. I think I'm trying to remember exactly what Mike Tomlin said when someone asked him about re-signing Antonio Brown. It was completely dismissive, but so it's not always like that. It's not always like he's he's not going to re-sign everyone. But Antonio Brown is a special case, as we talked about last week.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I had for Steeler questions.
Okay. Well, I have some rather big picture Chiefs questions. And I was trying to think about the order to ask these in. I think my first question might segue into my second question. You know my second question because I mentioned it to you. But I'll ask my first question first because it might help answer the second one. So, like, you remember back when like Brady was with the Patriots, and there was always questions about whether like who do we attribute all the success to? Is it more Bill Belichick or is it more Tom Brady? And there was all the narrative about Brady being a system quarterback who doesn't have to make difficult throws a lot, and so we attributed more success to Belichick. And then we see when he leaves, everything goes south, and so you wonder, really how much was going on behind the scenes there, and should we have given Brady more credit for that? Anyway, I want your take on the Mahomes-Reed analogy here, or the analogous question. And I was trying to figure out a good way to phrase the question, but in general, like, I don't know exactly what the units are, but how much of this Chiefs' success over the past, let's say, I mean, it's weird because they didn't come into it together, but like, since Mahomes came in to the league, how much of their success since then do you attribute to Reed versus Mahomes?
Not giving it too much thought. My instinct is to go somewhere around like 70-30 in favor of Mahomes. I think that 30% is not dismissive in any way. Like, I think that Mahomes landing in Kansas City with Reed was important for him to become this person. So one could argue then, if I'm saying that, maybe 70-30 isn't fair. But because I don't necessarily, like, I think Mahomes would have probably been a very good quarterback wherever he went. And the reason why I think that is that he and whoever is advising him seem to have a really good sense of the kinds of things he needs to do to be successful and the kinds of people he should surround himself with to be successful. Like, I don't know how much of it's widely known, but it's definitely known widely in Kansas City that Mahomes really wanted to come to the Chiefs. And he was in conversations with the Chiefs, like leading up to even his agent Lee Steinberg. They were trying to figure out like, would this be possible? Could the Chiefs trade up? Everyone kind of knew it wasn't going to happen at 27. And Mahomes himself says that he mentioned to the Chiefs that it seemed like the Saints were really interested in him. I think the Saints drafted like the next spot. Was it 11 or 12? It was very soon after the Chiefs. Now Sean Payton in hindsight says that like he was all in on Mahomes and he really wanted Mahomes. So I think that kind of gives you a sense of like Mahomes' camp were really thinking about ways to put him in positions with people that would be good for him. And he also had the personality of like, for as much as he's in commercials and everything now, he intentionally refused any commercial during his rookie season because he felt like he had to like earn like his spot on the team, no endorsements, nothing. And until he was a starter and had done something, he didn't want to take anything outside of football. So that part of it becomes really hard to enumerate then, because it's like, well, Mahomes might have found someone like Reed or someone else that would be equally beneficial. And also, Reed has clearly contributed a level to his development that I don't know who else would have done or how they would have done it. But it's clear that Andy Reid is good at setting up a good team, and he's good at building a competent organization and bringing them to like consistent winning. And I think there's a huge benefit in Mahomes coming into an organization like that, which is where to me the 30% comes from. But Reid hadn't done it like this, before. And though he had put together good teams, he never had teams that were clutch. I think the clutchness I completely attribute to Mahomes. Like, I think he is that guy that just will always be unendingly trying to get it done and find a way to win. And he does it in ways that are really hard to believe sometimes. And so that's where I kind of lean more toward giving Mahomes credit than Reid, because as great as I think Andy Reid is, and I think he's one of the best coaches that ever coached, like, he never had this kind of success until Mahomes came along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, good. So with that in mind, then my next question, it might help to evaluate. I mean, the way I phrased it when I was drafting it here was suppose Mahomes, just like transport him back in time, he gets drafted, as he was drafted in 2017. He gets drafted, same physical characteristics and everything, in say 2002 by the Chiefs. I guess this would be Dick Vermeil. Mm-hmm. Just curious how you think that might, and there's many ways you could take this question, but like, how does that change the sort of major narratives of the NFL since then, right? You've got like the Brady Manning rivalry. You've got Ben occasionally winning a Super Bowl when someone else knocks out Brady. Everything that happened since then. Like, I guess the first question is like, how successful do you think Mahomes would have been back then? And then how does that affect the rest?
Before I answer the question, I'm curious how intentional the choice of the year 2002 is, because to me, I feel like that's the perfect year to choose. Like, if I were to have like 1 year to choose to transfer, I feel like that's the right year. So I wonder how you came to that conclusion.
I guess that was just right around the time that Manning and Brady were emerging, and I was thinking just like throw him in then too, and maybe like a little bit before Roethlisberger, because Roethlisberger came in 2004 and then had that crazy. But like, part of what I'm curious about is like, does Roethlisberger win any Super Bowls if Mahomes is in the league before him at that point? So that was more like self-interested in choosing 2002.
Well, because I mean that side of it, and like 2002 is like the Chiefs are on the cusp of building like one of the most explosive offenses that they've ever seen. Right. Like, Priest Holmes has just had his first kind of big year and is about to break out. Trent Green, we basically from 2002 through 2005, we had like the top offense in the league. So it would be a really interesting scenario to drop Mahomes into.
Yeah. I mean,
I
Green was
mean,
good too. Like it's like
yeah,
he was nothing to scoff at. And then you had like Dante Hall. Some of these names are like very
Priest Holmes,
Mark
Tony
Richter,
Gonzalez is there. But yes, Mark Richter,
Eddie
yeah.
Kennison. Yeah.
It was like,
Anyway, yeah. So drop Mahomes in there. What do you think? Imagine he's starting. I guess like he doesn't have to earn the starting job over Green.
yeah. I mean, I feel like that would be because like we talk about how he came into a really good situation in Kansas City. They set it up like I feel like 2002 is maybe not equally good, but it's one could argue like I would accept arguments that that could be a better situation than this. Like I personally would lean toward 2017-18 being better, but I think it's a reasonable position to hold that 2002 2003 would be better. Like you've got Priest Holmes, you've got one of the best offensive lines in NFL history. You've got some people's greatest tight end in NFL history, though some would argue that Mahomes has that right now. Um, so, and this offense was just extremely prolific. And Dick Vermeil is like an Andy Reid to me. Like he's that quality of coach. He's a really good coach. So I've got to think that Mahomes wins multiple Super Bowls. Like, the problem in Kansas City was that the defense didn't hold up. It's not like the team wasn't scoring, but again, that clutch thing was a little bit of a touch and go, And the other thing was the Chiefs at that time, besides like, I think they always seemed to come through at home, but they really did not play well in big games on the road. We lost a lot of big games on the road, even when we were very good. To be fair, in 2004, we lost a lot of big games at home, too. So I just think that, especially the 2003 squad, Mahomes being clutch, Mahomes being as awesome of a road quarterback as he is, like, I feel like that team does really, really well. I've got to think, so let's see, 2002 is the year that the Bucks beat the Raiders in the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah.
That year, like maybe our defense, like that might have been more akin to like the 2018 Chiefs. Like our defense might have been so bad that because we went 8-8 that year with like an awesome offense because our defense was so bad. 2003, like maybe Mahomes can outdo Manning in that crazy no punt game. The funny thing is like,
oh yeah, that was the divisional round game.
the divisional round, yeah, like it was
Yeah.
so devastating. I remember, I don't know if you remember, but I was like really cocky going into that game. Like I was like really overconfident. Like as an eighth grader, I think at the time. Like I was saying things like, "Oh man, like Peyton Manning's gonna go cry about it after this. Like we're gonna take it to him. Like we're gonna beat him." I was very, very confident, and then we lost. And I actually went back and watched some of that game not that long ago, and it sadly was not that close. Like it was a one-score game, but it was never really one score through most of it. Like going back and rewatching, like the Chiefs had some big moments, but they never had moments where you're like, okay, they're wresting control of this game. Like it was more like, oh, they might catch up now, you know. So that's kind of disappointing on rewatch. But and that year. So I feel like 2002, maybe they don't win it. 2003, it would have been probably his first encounter with Belichick's defense in the playoffs. So I don't know if he could beat them then. But maybe if you're looking in the like 2004, 2005 range, maybe that's when Mahomes can start winning some Super Bowls. And after that, it becomes interesting because everything disintegrated because Trent Green got hurt at the beginning of 2006. So in that context, if we're keeping Mahomes, but our offensive line was also really aging at that time, the defense had never been good. So you wonder what they would have done in that like 2006 to 2009 range.
Yeah, I mean, it gets very hypothetical. I mean, it's already incredibly hypothetical, but at that point, you're like, well, who would they have drafted? Would they have invested in the O-line or not?
We wouldn't have gotten Scott Pioli like as our general manager, so we wouldn't have had would we have gotten Herm Edwards as a coach? I don't know. Would maybe Dick Vermeil sticks it out a couple more years if
Yeah,
like.
if he's winning Super Bowls.
Although when he won in '99 with the Rams, he retired immediately, so maybe he wouldn't have. um, but maybe we get an offensive-minded head coach instead of Herm Edwards afterward. So I think, but I do think that Mahomes ends up being on par, depending on what they do coaching wise. Like, I think if he gets a good coaching situation, then I think that the Chiefs could have been a team that kind of challenged Brady and the Patriots in the playoffs. If the coaching situation wasn't as good, then they might have ended up being more like the Colts, like where they might win one or two, or make to the Super Bowl a couple times, but they might not be like dominant like they are today.
But you would still probably, I imagine, have the narrative of like who are the top quarter. I mean, there was still the Brady Manning narrative, even though
Yeah,
the Patriots were winning more, the Colts were.
yeah,
And I guess you have to think that Mahomes would have been in that narrative, and maybe even, I mean, who knows? It's like two, but I want to say maybe even like been been the top, or at least kicked one of them out of the top two conversation. Um, which is just so like I don't know. I started thinking about that, and then I was thinking like it's just so strange that like the way we remember these people and know these people and their legacies is so dependent on not just them, but on everything else that was going on around them at the time. Like I do think if Mahomes was in the league in 2002, I don't know that Ben Roethlisberger, you can't play out the details, but it's just you don't expect two Super Bowls or three Super Bowl appearances from him at that point. I don't know that you expect Flacco to win a Super Bowl. I mean, it's so far out that from 2002 that it's hard to extrapolate. But some of these players might have very different legacies, essentially.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think about it a lot. That what would Brady's legacy look like if Josh Allen was drafted 5 years earlier? Like before their second run of Super Bowls, and suddenly he had like a legitimate foe in the division, or even like 7, 8 years earlier, and like he's having to go up against the Bills because the Patriots just cleaned up that division year after year. And look, I'm not one to talk, like we also clean up our division right now, but one at least would argue that like the Chargers have Justin Herbert, like they have a quarterback that people regard as like one of the best in the league.
Yeah,
but
the Broncos had the great Russell Wilson. So.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's just the question. I mean, I don't know. It's like such a big counterfactual that in some sense, it's uh, almost just nonsense to evaluate. But in another sense, I feel like it really does show how contingent all these sort of stories and legacies are. And I guess another question that's like folded in here is the game different in a way that you think benefits Mahomes now versus what it was like back then? I mean, I do remember those games where like the Patriots roughed up the Colts receivers in like the AFC Championship, and then they made rule changes so that you couldn't have contact past 5 yards or whatever. So I wonder, but like Mahomes just seems like the kind of player that's like he would succeed no matter the context, essentially, right? He's just one of those all-time greats that the small rule changes like that are not going to affect his. I mean, they might impact him, but they're not going to severely affect him.
I think more than the rule changes, I would be concerned about whether like coaches in 2002 would be comfortable like letting Mahomes be Mahomes, because his play style, and it's not so much anymore because I think he has realized what defenses are giving him and he's taking that instead. But his play style breaks so many rules of quarterbacking, and like Brett Coleman shared the all-22 end zone view of that famous Mahomes fourth down throw against the Ravens in 2018.
I saw this, yeah.
And like it looks bananas from the end zone. Like it's just like he's like a coach watching that would be like, "What are you doing?" But I feel like if anybody, Dick Vermeil, because Dick Vermeil was very much like Mike Tomlin and like Andy Reid, was a personalities guy. Like the story of him and Dante Hall is very famous and heartwarming. Actually, like Dante Hall credits Dick Vermeil as like the first guy that believed in him, and that's how he felt like he had the confidence to be successful. Is that people didn't value his role and didn't think he could do much, and Dick Vermeil came to him and was like, "You could be this kind of player. Like you could be great." And gave him the opportunity to do so. So it's possible that Dick Vermeil would see in Mahomes what the potential there and let him be him. But then the kind of counter you could have to that is like we have a little bit of a case study in that time period, and that's Brett Favre. And Brett Favre was a crazy wheeling dealing quarterback, and he wasn't as successful as Mahomes is now. So maybe that has something to do with the time, or maybe that just has something to do with Mahomes being Mahomes.
Yeah, I think I would guess it's more Mahomes being. I mean, because like Ben Roethlisberger in his rookie, like back then, he was running around playing unconventionally too. I don't think he knew what reads he was making or anything. He was just running around until someone was open, basically. And he would make it. I mean, I don't think he ever made a throw like that one to Tyreek Hill against the Ravens, but he made a lot of crazy throws that, in hindsight, those were pretty crazy. So I think it could have worked for Mahomes back then. Just and even if the coaches don't want him to do it, if he knows he can do it, I feel like he's the kind of player that would do it anyway.
Yeah. That's kind of what happens with Andy Reid. Like even with Travis Kelce, right? Like Travis Kelce will lateral the ball in the middle of the game and then be like, I know that if it's a fumble, like Coach Reid is gonna kill me. Like he's like, I gotta get it right when I'm gonna do it, otherwise can't do it.
Yeah. That's good. That's the reason you cultivate the personality that Reid has cultivated, because it makes players extra careful not to fumble when they try something like that. Like he probably really does like it that Travis Kelce does that because it usually works, but he can't admit to liking it, I guess, right? I mean, I don't know. Maybe he has something.
Well, Travis Kelce has. I remember I think it was 2017. No, it was 2017. We played the Giants. Reid ran a trick play where Travis Kelce was going to throw a pass, and he basically just had one read, and if that read wasn't open, just throw it away. And instead, he looked backside, I think it was Demarcus Robinson, and just heaved a bomb, and it got picked off. And he was like, it took years for Coach Reid to let me throw a ball again. He was just like, I just saw him come open, and I was like, I got to try it.
Oh, that's awesome. I want to look up that replay. That's awesome. Seeing Kelce heaving a bomb first place. That was good. This is very tangential at this point, but when we were imagining Mahomes coming in 2002 and starting in 2002, I started to wonder what your thoughts are. Suppose he had started in 2017 for the Chiefs. Like, what do you think? What do you think happens for them then?
I think people forget that Alex Smith was actually really good, especially to start the year in 2017. Like, we started, I think, 5-0, and then lost to the Steelers, as always seemed to happen back then. That was, like, we lost that game, I think.
Was that the one that bounced off the...
Yeah, who was the defender? I think it was Philip Gaines. Someone had like a pick and dropped it right into Antonio Brown's hands, and he streaked down the sideline for a touchdown.
Yep.
Like that.
It's like a third or fourth down in the fourth quarter when we were trailing. Yeah,
that was abysmal. And I don't know. Back like the Steelers defense, it's so funny how it changed because the Steelers defense just had Alex Smith's number all the time. Like, he could not figure out what to do against them. Like, our offense came into that game, like, we were putting up points. And like, we'd scored 42 in New England and beat them. We had scored,
week one? I think
Week one, yeah. They were doing... It was the kickoff game. They had just won the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I think this was their 28-3 Super Bowl, coming off of that win. And then we just... They actually started really hot. Like, they almost went up 14-0. I think they had a touchdown to Gronk that was like reversed or something. And then it was a really close game throughout. And then we just blew the doors off of them in the end of the third and the fourth quarter. We like a bomb to Tyreek and then a bomb to Kareem Hunt. And then suddenly and then Charkandrick West had like a the 20 or 30-yard touchdown run to seal it. Like, I remember that was the moment. I still remember my feeling in that moment when we went up in the fourth quarter by multiple scores, and I was like, oh, we're going to win this game. Like, this is crazy.
I remember that is one of the. I remember that game too, and that was like one of my happiest experiences not watching the Steelers. I was just so thrilled that the Chiefs were beating the Patriots in this supposed celebration of their championship week one. Yeah, that was awesome.
That was unfortunately the last like really good game we saw Eric Berry play, because he tore his Achilles in that game and then was just never the same. I think he played like one half for the Chiefs after that or something like that.
Was it early in that game? I don't remember that.
I think it was fairly early. I remember this may not have been when he tore the Achilles, but he made a big fourth down stop. So my memory of this is not good, so it's possible I'm getting this completely wrong. But I think the Patriots came down and scored. Then Kareem Hunt fumbled. He was a rookie back then. And I think he had never fumbled in his entire college career, and he fumbled like in the first drive of his first game as a pro. And then, if I remember correctly, they had a touchdown overturned, and then we had a big fourth down stop in the red zone. And I think it was Eric Berry that made the play. But I don't remember when in the game he actually tore his Achilles. I don't think it was like at the very end, but I can't. That's the only Eric Berry memory I have in that game, is that he made a big stop in the first quarter on a fourth down. So it doesn't answer your question at all.
I don't remember. I gotta go watch the highlights of that game because that was a joyous game. But so anyway, if they had Mahomes that year, you think?
I think that
what do you think?
Alex Smith contributed a lot to Mahomes' development. So, and Alex Smith played pretty well. Now we ended up going 10-6, winning the division, and then losing a real stupid game against the Titans at home in the wild card game. I think we do better than that. I think. But I don't think it's that much better. Like, I don't think this is like a team that's going to like challenge to win the Super Bowl in Mahomes' first year. I think he got helped a lot by learning from Alex Smith. So, yeah, I don't know that I would like it would have been that different. Like maybe because we had this really bad lull in the middle of the year where teams started playing the soft shell and we couldn't figure it out. And I think someone as creative as Mahomes probably would have come in and done more. Like Alex Smith was very much a like run the offense guy, and he wouldn't take risky throws, which Mahomes would have. So that might have changed some outcomes where we lost to some pretty bad teams, including the Giants on that game when Kelsey threw the pick. So, but I don't know that he would have, like maybe it's like 11-5 instead of 10-6, and maybe it's a divisional round loss instead of a wild card loss, something like that.
Yeah. Well, maybe the Chiefs would have taken out the Jaguars, and then we wouldn't have had to play the Jaguars that year. Somehow they just had our number. But yeah, anyway, Dave Damashek loves these like NFL things, or you can like change one thing and then I guess that was. I wonder if he's done one about it. Mahomes started in 2017. But, anyway, okay. Well, we got to take a break in just a minute or two here. Do you think we can get in any general NFL questions?
Maybe we can go to the break, but before we do general NFL questions, I forgot to tell you I was going to do this episode, but we had mentioned a new segment that we were going to come up with called Chris Questions It. And so I will introduce the segment, and we will do our first iteration of it after the break.
Oh gosh, I gotta mentally prepare in the break here. Okay.
Yeah, get an extra cup of coffee or something. You're going to be questioning things. All right.
And we're back.
We are back, and we are back to introduce a new segment that I hope will be a recurring segment on this podcast. We need to get some like theme music or something, like intro music for the segment.
We can have it for the podcast in general too.
That's true, but particularly this segment, I think it needs something. So this recurring segment is called Chris Questions It, and the kind of basic idea for the segment is that Chris, as a philosopher, has a lot of experience and training in questioning things that most of the rest of us take for granted. So I will every week present Chris with something that we as lay people generally accept as fact, and we will see if Chris is able to find a way to question it. And
Okay.
um, so the
All
first
right.
topic is the topic that motivated the creation of this in the first place. And I don't know if you all remember that we had a conversation several episodes ago about whether momentum exists in sports. And I made a short clip of that conversation and put it on YouTube, and we were surprised at how many views it got. And it was mainly people with physics backgrounds thinking it was a physics related video because we had asked the question. The title was just, does momentum exist? And I thought it was interesting that like that would have been a hot take. And Chris was like, well, actually, one could question momentum. And so for Chris questions it, the first installment, I'm going to ask you, does momentum exist? Can you question the existence of momentum, something that in the physical world most of us take for granted?
Um, yeah. Uh, yeah, I think you could question it. I think I think I'll try two paths to question it. Um, so I feel a little worried about questioning it on the first path because I would really want to brush up on some of the relevant physics before I do so. But I'll just go ahead anyway. um, so um, momentum. Yeah, this is interesting. So what I was going to say, and I think I need to do some more research before I guess, say it with my full backing, because I think I'm questioning this as I think about it. But momentum being mass times velocity, at least in classical mechanics, um, would be so velocity being the first derivative of position. Um, so one method of trying to attack the reality or the existence, I guess that's the other way I want to attack it, but of momentum would be to question whether uh, what the fundamental dynamics are and whether they give pride of place to position or to velocity or to acceleration. Um, and if the fundamental dynamics, like the fundamental dynamical laws, that sort of chunk the universe forward in time from an initial state, do they pay attention to velocities or not? And if they didn't, then you would start to question whether something like um, momentum would actually be a real thing, whether velocity would be a real thing, right? Maybe they're just sort of frame dependent quantities that actually don't figure into the fundamental dynamics. So one way to question it would be to say, no, like in quantum mechanics, the fundamental dynamics, the equations that chunk you forward in time, or the equation that chunks you forward in time, the Schrodinger equation is first order in time, so it depends only on the positions of things at a time to figure out what they're going to do next. And then you would wonder, is momentum a real physical quantity in that context, or is it somehow just a useful approximation? Um, that was the first way of questioning it. I don't know how coherent that sounded, and I also don't want to fully endorse that. Well, I don't want to fully endorse either, but I don't want to fully endorse that because I feel like there are yeah I would want to check up on a few things before I said that was a genuinely good way of questioning the reality of momentum or the existence of momentum. So here's the second way of questioning it. Uh, what I guess the question is, what does that amount to question the existence or reality of momentum? Um, it's not like I don't think it's like questioning the existence or reality of uh, like my hand, right? Like we know what it would be for that not to exist. I guess it would just not happen, right? Um, but what would it be for momentum to exist, to really exist or not really exist, or to be real or not to be real. I think I lose a bit of my grip there. I mean, you can define it, and it could be a useful quantity that is a function of other quantities in predicting the behaviors of systems. Does that make it real? I mean, I don't know. Is a center of mass real? Like take the solar system and find its center of mass at a given time. Like, is that real? Like, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, is it, you know, we can certainly define it, um, and figure out where it is and stuff like that. So it's real in some sense. Is it? It's not real in the sense that you can bump into it. Um, but I guess a lot of real things you can't bump into. I guess here I could. I mean, I think here I'll give you a line of thought that I would be more willing to endorse, which is that I think the question of whether something is real or not uh, is often a confused question. Um, so, so if you think about like the way we normally use the word real, uh, it's usually there's a couple features, but oftentimes it's like, you know, is this real butter, right? Well, there we know what the contrast would be, not real butter. Like the I can't believe it's not butter stuff. That's just hydrogenated oil or whatever it is. Uh, but without that contrast, it's sort of unclear what we mean when we ask, is this real butter? Well, if there were no such contrast, like so, take like, is this a real coffee cup? Like, what would it be for it not to be? Like, the question sort of doesn't. It's not clear how to answer it because it's not clear what the contrast is, what's being asked there. And so, if you ask, like, is momentum real? I feel like there might be, you know, a real what, right? A real physical quantity. Well, it's certainly a quantity we can define and use to predict things. Uh, a real I guess there's a suspicion that the question doesn't amount to much, and it's not clear how to answer it. So that's my sort of I would endorse that answer, or at least that partial answer. That I'm suspicious of the question. I think I'll also give a brief diatribe here. I think philosophers in general are very too willing to think they understand a question and then just like jump in and see where they can get whereas they really should attack the question more. Like, why does this strike me as a good question, and is it really a good question? I think that is something that we ought to do more of. So I don't know. Did I question it sufficiently?
Yeah, you definitely questioned it. And the one thing that crossed my mind was like when you talk about the center of mass of the solar system, it's like something that even like if one were to be able to calculate its location, there may not actually be anything there, which is an interesting thing to think about trying to figure out what that means. But at the same time, then if you're trying to find the center of mass of like a pencil, you could try to quantify it physically without quantifying it. You could find it by balancing it, and that center of mass might have way more meaning to you because it's like a physical thing that you can observe, whereas the center of mass of the solar system is only something you can calculate at a given time and not really. And the same. So then I started thinking the same thing about momentum. Like, what if you have a safety running at you at 15 miles an hour and then a defensive tackle running at you at 15 miles an hour, and you feel the impact of both of those collisions separately? Like, that might be something that gives you a meaning, give momentum some meaning to you as an observer.
Yeah, it would certainly. If you wanted to explain why it hurt a lot more when you collided with the defensive end or defensive tackle, then you might appeal to the momentum and the conservation of momentum, explaining why you went flying in that case or something like that. Yeah, that seems right. But I think the center of mass, the pencil is interesting, right? Because you can find it in like at least one dimension when you're balancing on your finger.
Right.
But you'd have to, so it's like along along that line somewhere. Right? Yeah. Whereas the center, I mean, in certain contexts, I imagine it might be useful to have the center of mass of the solar system when you're computing something about, I don't know, the rotation of the galaxy or something like that. So, like, they can be useful quantities to predict how things are going to behave. Um, and once we start, have ways of calculating them and using them for predictions, then I think you have, in some sense, all you need to ask. The question then, is it real? Maybe it lapses. Um, it's like, what do you mean? I can make predictions with it. I can use it for. I can predict where the pencil will fall or not fall when I put it on my finger. But again, I'm sort of suspicious about the question in the first place. Um, like usually we have a contrast in mind, right? Like fake cream or fake milk or fake butter. I know what those are. Fake momentum. I don't know what that is, right? Like, what? Uh, uh, so so I so it's just not. I don't know.
Interesting. Do you? This kind of goes off on a little bit of a tangent, and I feel like we should call this the end of the segment because I feel like the next part of this probably will not follow the segment. But
There's the segment end music.
yeah, the segment and music inserted here. This kind of leads me to a question that it's not really NFL related. Well, you know what it is because of like I think it can be based on our Aaron Rodgers discussion before, and I was thinking about there are a lot of people like Aaron Rodgers, and it actually wasn't Aaron Rodgers himself that said anything that prompted me to think of this question as something to discuss. But what do you think about as somebody who like a lot of your professional life is trying to find answers to things, if that's a fair way, maybe it's like extremely reductive, but like at least thinking about things, questioning things in a healthy manner. How much skepticism is healthy? Because we're getting, when you get to this whole like do your own research idea, where people are not accepting things that are told to them by institutions or by, thousands of years of knowledge. And instead of accepting those things, there's this idea that like don't believe anything until you have looked at it yourself. There was a quote, I won't even say who it was from because I don't want it to be like inflammatory, but I think the quote was, "I'm not a flat earther. I'm not a round earther. I'm just not somebody who follows the cult of science." And so when you get to like the level of skepticism where you basically just don't believe anyone on anything, I guess my question is, as someone who I think more than most would probably endorse questioning things and being a skeptic, where do you get from healthy to unhealthy level of skepticism?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think there's different contexts in which you can situate the question of how healthy it is to keep questioning things. If you do it like privately, uh, on your own time, and then can still navigate sort of public fora, and still have still engage smartly and productively with the rest of society, then I think go ahead. Uh, but if it starts to infect the way you interact with the rest of the world, I think then adversely affected, then I think you should question whether you're questioning too much at that point. Uh, I guess I am a fan of questioning received wisdom, um, but I don't know that. But you have to make sure that where you get ends up making sense. Right? Uh, and you can really go off the deep end here, right? Like you could be like, here's the way to be a flat earther, right? Uh, Poincaré, the mathematician philosopher guy from late 1800s, I think, um, had this. I mean, he wasn't the only one that had the idea, but you can always sort of. Okay, so we talk about like the geometry of space, right? It being like classically at least three-dimensional, and there being one dimension of time, um, and then you can plot the trajectory of something through space over time, right? So great. Uh, but you can always, as Poincaré pointed out, like move essentially. What's the way to put this? You can put stuff from the geometry of space or space time if you're thinking about things relativistically. You can, if you think of space as having a certain structure, you can actually think that it actually has a different structure and move some of the things that are making it appear to have a three-dimensional structure into the dynamics, into the laws of nature. Right? So you might. Here's how to be a flat earther. Again, to ramble my way into this point. You say, no, Earth really is flat. It's just that the dynamics, that is the laws of nature, are making it look curved, right? The trajectory, you see those images of a sphere from space. You don't have to question whether those are real images. You just question whether light is really traveling in a straight line, right? From the edges of the Earth there. Maybe you think that the laws of nature are making the light curve in a strange way so that it looks spherical even though it's not. And you can keep doing backflips like this, right? Keep positing stranger and stranger dynamical laws that are going to give you the appearance of something that's three-dimensional even if it's really two-dimensional. So
I would just interject and say I'm not sure that the flat Earth arguments are that sophisticated.
No, I don't know. I mean, I haven't looked into them. I think probably they're oftentimes more questioning whether that was a real image or whether it was a staged image, or right? But you can do it in other ways too, right? You can move facts about the geometry into facts about the laws, or vice versa. That's not very helpful, I think, right? Like ultimately, that's like, yes, you can do it. What have you gained by doing that? Because it still looks three-dimensional according to all of these metrics, and it's still. I get your point that it looks flat when you're walking on it, right? If that's the flat earther's point, then sure, right? It does look flat when you're walking on it, usually, unless you're on a not flat part. But it turns out that for many, many applications, it's not at all useful to think of it as flat. It's a lot more convenient to think of it as three-dimensional, and so it is. Right? I think that's I don't know, like, yeah. Question it some, and then evaluate whether your questioning has actually helped you. Maybe that's a good approach.
And I think too, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And I think the other point I would make in that vein is that I think there needs to be the humility too of understanding that you're not going to understand everything. And so there are certain things that one has to accept as fact because you can't be an expert in everything. And that's the one real downside about the accessibility of information these days, is that the ability to read what somebody says about something has given people this false idea that they can become an expert at anything just by reading things online about them. And there's a reason why people spend years training for certain jobs, and they spend years studying in certain areas, and it takes actually a lot of work and expertise to be an expert in certain things. And I think sometimes people have lost that to think that you can understand. To use like a personal example, like I am a physician, and there are a lot of people that come in with ideas of their diagnoses and ideas of their medications, and I think it's all very good that they have information. I think it helps some people understand things better. But it also sometimes leads to people not understanding what they have because they follow a narrative that they want and view the information accessible to them in a certain way. And unfortunately, like, I don't want to sound like someone with hubris, but it just doesn't replace the not just the training, but the mindset, I think, that one can have to view things accurately. Like, I wish I could say even like anecdotally, like 10% of people were good at this, coming into an office and saying, like, it's unfortunately it's really low, the number of people that are actually good at like coming in and being like, oh, I think this is what I have, these are the symptoms I had, do you think and I'm like, oh yeah, you're right, I think you do. It unfortunately it's not that high, and I think people don't realize that.
Yeah, I think. Well, is this part? I mean, I think part of the problem when you try to do this is that there's a lot of terminology that is used in a specific, particular way within a discipline, and if you come in and you read that terminology and it like suggests certain ideas to you from associations you might have with that terminology in other contexts, then you're going to make a bunch of false inferences based on that, right? I think this happens in philosophy as well. Um, uh, I think some philosophical questions are like that. They are sort of imputing a false picture of what some word means uh, onto it from some other context, right? And then you get a question that sounds maybe profound, even though it's not, right? It's really just a sort of linguistic mistake, as it were.
Yeah.
I think this
And
happens not just in philosophy, but all over.
there are a lot of things that overlap. Like, here, let me ask you, if just off the top of your head, if you were to think of a psychiatric diagnosis that has to do with someone not being able to concentrate, what was the first diagnosis that would pop into your head?
ADHD.
Yeah, and that's what happens with most people. When they're having trouble concentrating, they come in and they say, I have ADHD. Well, I will tell you from practice that the percentage of people that are having trouble concentrating that have ADHD is very low. Like, there are a lot of things that can make you have trouble concentrating, and there are a lot of disorders and not disorders, life stresses. There are a lot of reasons why you could be having difficulty concentrating, and it is so tied to ADHD in the public's mind. Whereas if you were to take just randomly, you were to take every single person that came to you that is having trouble concentrating and just tell all of them you don't have ADHD, you'd be right way more than you'd be wrong. But people don't like hearing that, right? They come in and they're like, I have ADHD. And you go through their history and you're like, you don't have ADHD. Like, but when somebody is really set on something, it becomes very difficult to then have a productive conversation, because I do think also there's a perception that like physicians don't listen to their patients, which is rooted in some truth, right? But that just because someone's disagreeing with you doesn't mean they're not listening to you. They might just have a better idea of what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like what you're talking about is a kind of like, well, it's certainly kind of hubris that like you understand the criteria for someone to have ADHD. Well, maybe you don't. You were not trained. Just because you're having trouble paying attention does not mean that you have ADHD. Yeah. Uh, yeah. I feel like this is. I mean, I imagine it might be. You could. Yeah. I mean, and then they leave because they don't get the diagnosis, they don't get the drugs that they're looking for, and they go find
Right.
another. Like, this must be really frustrating. I can only imagine. But,
Yeah, it's become and then you have to start walking this real line with people about like, you know, because ultimately, like, I try to meet people where they are. The only way to help somebody is at some point try to get them to engage with care that you think they need. And so a lot of times that means like not fighting them on things, but at the same time, like, I'm not going to, especially with ADHD, it's tough because medications for ADHD are controlled medications. So you're not going to give that to somebody if they don't need it. It becomes a real big liability issue, actually, like prescribing controlled substances for someone who doesn't need it. So that can really lead to a wedge point. I feel like that's where, and unfortunately, yeah, you do have situations like you said where people just go try to find someone else, or they want to see a different provider, and they have all kinds of reasons why they think you're not giving them the medication they want. But I have had some success stories where you just kind of like ride it out with someone and don't give them what they want, but they continue coming, and then eventually you're able to come up with a productive plan that actually might help them. So I feel like that ends up being the goal, is to try to keep people engaged even if you're not doing what they want, and maybe develop your relationship with them to the point that you can actually have a productive working relationship.
Yeah, it must be. And then you have to find the way into that, I guess, right? Because there's going to be the initial disappointment or whatever that you're saying, that I don't have this thing that I think I have, and so why shouldn't I just leave and find someone else? Yeah, I don't have that aspect to my job.
And this is where that this is a part of the basis for that. My idea of life being a subjective experience, because if a doctor you talk to right when you meet them tells you don't have the diagnosis that you think you have, they're they're an idiot. They're not listening to you. But if you build a relationship and you realize that this doctor may actually be listening to you and care what you think, and they're actually asking questions about your life, and they keep coming to appointments, and you're having a productive relationship. After a year, they tell you don't have ADHD. Suddenly, it's a good doctor, and maybe you were wrong.
Yeah.
So it shows that these things are actually very important in conveying information to people and helping. When I think a lot of times, for whatever reason, we feel like just giving people information is going to help change their mind. And I just increasingly feel like that's not the case. You develop relationships with people, and that's how you help people understand things that you want them to understand, or at least understand your perspective, because that's all you can really try to get someone to understand, right?
Yeah, I suppose that's right. I mean, you can get them to understand. Yeah, I'm taking this out of context. Yes, I think I agree. Should we didn't really do any general NFL questions yet. Should we do some of those, or do you want to move on to anecdotes? I don't know. It's already been a somewhat long episode.
Yeah, maybe we can do one general NFL question. Do you have one that you feel like is somewhat short?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's about the Steelers, but I just wanted your take on it. And it can be generalized, I suppose. So, there were all these reports about Russell Wilson in Denver being a sort of toxic teammate and being a cause of a lot of problems. There are now reports that are coming out in Pittsburgh of him being such a great teammate, and the real problem in Denver was Sean Payton. Car beeping outside. And it's interesting the extent to which, the reports about Wilson, the negative reports about Wilson are coming from Denver, and the negative reports about Sean Payton or other sources are coming from Pittsburgh. And it just makes me wonder, how much of these are sort of generated, as it were, by beat writers who are trying to get in the good graces of the relevant parties. I don't know what to believe at this point, aside from looking at the correlations between the reports and their location and their sources. That it's fairly striking. So, do you have thoughts about this? How much of this drama is sort of just manufactured for the sake of getting into the good graces of the people that are now in your organization?
I think that some of it definitely is. My intuition is that I think both Sean Payton and Russell Wilson are probably somewhat difficult people to get along with if you don't agree with what they're doing. They seem to both be very have clear visions about what they want to do and how they want to do it. And if you're not on board with that, I don't think things go very well with either of them. But I agree with your premise. I think that's a lot of it is that. So basically, what I'm trying to say is I think there's a grain of truth in both. But I think that unfortunately, that is the kind of media athlete relationship we have now is that media members need access in a way that they didn't before. I think my understanding is that it's really been since the advent of social media where athletes have ways to communicate with the public without the media. They had started with like Twitter was like the big first one, but now like all these athletes have podcasts. It's probably the reason why people aren't listening to ours because there's so many athlete podcasts to listen to. But they they don't need the media, and so then the media have to do things in order to get access and maintain their livelihood. And I don't know how easy it is to cross athletes, especially when you're a local beat writer, right? Like if you're not really in a position to make people mad because you don't want to lose access, and especially you can't make the team mad, right? Like, so I don't know. I do kind of agree with your thought process that I think a lot of it is just, well, the Steelers want everyone to think that Peyton was the problem in that relationship and Russell Wilson's going to be great, and the Broncos want everyone to. I mean, the Broncos. I mean, they're gonna find out. I mean, if Bo Nix isn't good, it doesn't matter what anybody's narrative is. Like, they're gonna be in trouble. They really just need Bo Nix to be a good quarterback. That's all. I don't think they should be caring about narrative whatsoever.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. But I mean, I'm sure you're right that there's some truth to both sides, and it's just you know you can predict which media sources are going to um, highlight which parts of the truth based on what their interests are. I guess. Um,
So I think Ryan Russillo brought this up. I don't remember in what context, but he was talking about like, can you name the people who have won championship who like for whom that championship is like doing a lot of work in developing their legacy. And I think both Russell Wilson and Sean Payton are great examples of this. Like, how differently would both of them be viewed if they didn't have their one title?
yeah, I wonder about Mike Tomlin too. Um, I
Yeah,
I
true.
kind of feel like it's maybe doing. Maybe I'm just biased, but I feel like it's doing a little less work for him than for Wilson or Payton. But if he hadn't won that, I feel like yeah, there would be a lot more. Maybe not. Yeah, it's playing a big role probably. Yeah.
But I particularly, because I think, Russell Wilson has been maligned enough by enough people. I don't necessarily need to go over that again. But I think it's particularly interesting with Sean Payton because, he won that title in '09, and that was a good Colts team that they beat. Like, I feel like if you play that Super Bowl 10 times, the Colts win 6 or 7, But Peyton, called a good game. That surprise onside kick to start the second half, all very important, and they won. And Manning threw a bad pick at the end. But if he doesn't win that title, like the Saints have had good teams that have had some bad playoff losses, and some of them you could argue like bad luck. The Minneapolis Miracle was really bad luck.
Yeah.
They lost like a real tough game against Jim Harbaugh's 49ers. I remember where Alex Smith brought the 49ers in and won the game at the end. And I think they lost another one to Minnesota on a last second touchdown to Kyle Rudolph, I seem to remember. But it's he also had a lot of 7 and 9 years. And then Drew Brees we consider one of the best quarterbacks ever. And I remember I think besides after they won the Super Bowl, they went to one conference title game after that. And then he's come to Denver and he hasn't done that much. We really regard Sean Payton very, very highly, and he won his one title and honestly hasn't done that much of note besides that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That one title really it changes things for you. It changes the entire narrative about your competence as a coach or player.
And
I
of
mean,
course,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say Aaron Rodgers falls into this too, since we were talking about him last week.
Yeah.
Last episode.
Yeah. No. Yeah, I mean, Bill Cowher had to win that one Super Bowl, and then he was good retiring, I guess.
Yeah.
At least I did that thing. That's all I needed. Um,
I'm actually like a little surprised Bill Cowher never came back to coach. He was like rumored forever, but gosh, that
yeah,
studio gig must be a nice, like, relaxed life.
his teeth are too white now for coaching. You can't have teeth that are that white. Still be a coach. I don't know. That was the first thing I noticed about him when he took that studio. Like, wow, his teeth got whiter. Like,
That's funny.
they were like surprisingly white. But yeah, I guess I can't. Is he still on? There was some rumor about him not being his contract not being renewed.
Oh yeah, that does
Yeah,
sound familiar. Maybe he won't be back. I don't remember. Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know.
we'll find out at football season.
Yeah.
Although,
Well,
well, this is too tangential to actually talk about, but I'm just gonna quickly say, like, I feel like I don't enjoy those studio shows like I used to. I don't watch them anymore. I used to
me
love
neither.
them as a kid.
Yeah, I attributed a great deal of significance to their thoughts and their picks, and now I attribute almost nothing to their thoughts. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Have I lost something? I think I've just I don't know. You think of it as more noise now, right? It's like
Yeah, it's
the
like
thing that
it's
matters
kind
is
of
the
like
game.
boring. Yeah,
Yeah. Plus, your life gets busier and you have other things to do during the pregame show
yeah, that's
than
true
watch
too.
it.
Yeah.
Should we
Oh,
do a break and then come back and wrap up?
sounds good. And we're back. Before we do anecdotes, I do have one NFL question to ask you. And I don't know that there's a great answer to this question, so maybe it'll be really quick. Um, but I thought about watching the draft. You know, Roger Goodell has been the NFL commissioner for a long time. I can't remember when it switched from Paul Tagliabue to Roger Goodell, but it's got to be like somewhere around 2010 or something, right? Maybe
I
before
thought it
then,
was
even.
earlier.
Yeah,
Wasn't
maybe
it?
before.
Like 2007 or something?
Yeah, that sounds right. It's got to be
Because
around that range.
I remember Paul Tagliabue. Somebody say his name. I don't think I ever said his name aloud. I remember him presenting the trophy when we won in 2005, but I think Goodell did in 2008.
Oh,
Maybe
okay.
I'm wrong, but
Oh, could
that
be
would be
right.
an interesting false memory.
I was nowhere near winning the Super Bowl around those times, so
That's the
yeah.
only
But
way I would have to remember it.
I mean, I know for sure. When did he start cracking down on, like, after the James Harrison hit? That was 2010 or 2011 or something, right? Like,
Yeah, it was around that time.
anyway, I should probably get to my question.
2006. I just looked it up.
Oh, nice. Okay. Uh, so we're talking about he's coming on, like, he's getting close to 20 years at this job, and it strikes me every time he does anything publicly that he is not a good public speaker. Like, he's so awkward as a public speaker, and I don't understand. Like, how 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 are you the commissioner of the NFL, and how have you been the commissioner for that long? And the weird thing is, if I don't know if you've ever seen, like, behind the scenes videos. I happened to see one because Jason Kelsey was, like, filming their podcast in the NFL studio, in the NFL building, I think, in, like, one of the rooms there, and he, like, took a phone and he, like, knocked on our door and walked in, and Roger Goodell was in, like, a schedule meeting. And Roger Goodell seemed like a normal person when he talked to him, and I was like, what? Like, who is this guy? It's like, we see the most, like, he is the most buttoned up isn't even the right word, because I feel like that has a positive implication. Like, he's just robotic. He's like the most
Yeah.
robotic, expressionless, no, not fun, not entertaining. Like, as a public speaker, it just seems like he's never done this before every single time, and he's been doing it for 18 years. So I don't understand. That's not really a question. Maybe I'm just asking you why. Why is he such a bad public speaker?
I mean,
Why is he
is
so
there?
awkward?
I wonder. I don't have a. I this is one of those cases where I don't have a sufficiently sophisticated take to endorse it, but I wonder if somehow you could make the case that either he or the owners wanted to select somebody that was appropriate, like very awkward in public speaking context, because they don't want, I don't know, they don't want him to steal their thunder. So I don't really know what it would be, but maybe there's like some reason that it's advantageous either to him or to the owners that he is like this. It's hard to see what it would be because it seems just totally non-advantageous. Uh, but maybe, but it, maybe they just don't care, and it's the fact that the league keeps making money that keeps him in the job. I think that could be it too.
Because like
I have no diagnosis.
he like I feel like when you're awkward and robotic and it makes you look like more bumbling when you make a bad, when you suspend Ray Rice for 2 games and then try to add to the suspension when the video comes out.
Yeah.
Nothing you do that's public facing gives the people confidence that you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and that doesn't seem like it's to the NFL's advantage. um, uh, there have been we count the number of times when they've bumbled something. Yeah, they bumbled something.
Or bungled.
And it looks
something.
like a bungled. Yeah, I guess that's the Bengals. Yeah. And it looks like they should have like a competent person would have managed this differently, right? And maybe they just, I don't know. They just, I guess there's some cost to switching to a new commissioner. Maybe that's why they haven't. But it is odd. He's been there I mean, they're making tons of money, so I guess that's the bottom line.
It's funny your comment about them like maybe wanting like make them look better, because I will say Clark Hunt is also one of the worst public speakers I've ever seen. And I feel like Robert Kraft is pretty bad as a public speaker too. So maybe it's just like they're like, we need someone that looks like us, otherwise we will look so bad in comparison.
Maybe that's it. Or maybe it's just like pretty gross incompetence across the board and they can't really tell when someone is not a good public speaker. Maybe that's the alternative, right? It's a bunch of old white guys that are in their position just because of their money, basically. I mean, that's the other story here, I guess.
Yeah, because it is funny I always found the contrast between how Goodell is when he's talking and the enthusiasm with which he gives first-round draft picks a hug on the stage. Like just doesn't seem like the same person. It's so weird how like big of a hug they give each other. It's like what.
Yeah, and it always is it's funny too. It's funny to see him give those. Sometimes he gets like, doesn't he get like lifted off the ground?
Like, lifted off or just like enveloped in a large human.
Yeah. He doesn't, it's not always clear that he expects it to be as vivacious of a hug as it is.
All right, well, I don't know that we solved any problems with that one, but it's just something I don't understand. Will never understand. But I'll say the same about Clark Hunt. I don't understand why he's not a better public speaker at this point. Like, he's literally an image. Like, so much of his livelihood is just sounding competent when you talk and managing your money well. Those are the 2 things. That's it.
And yet, we can't do the first.
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
All right. Well, should we move on to... Oh, no, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe we should. I was just... But, I mean, one doesn't have to look far in other domains to see similar levels of incompetence amongst people in power. Or
maybe it's just trendy right now. It's just the trend.
I won't say anything more, but one can fill that in how they want to. Should we do anecdotes?
Yeah, let's do it. I feel like it's your turn to go first, I think.
Okay. Well, I'll go first. This is actually Steelers related, but do you remember we had this it's also CIS related, so our middle/high school. I think it was 8th grade when we had Well, maybe it was, yeah, I don't know, seventh grade. I don't know. We went to the corn maze because one of the teachers at the school, um, I guess her family owned this big corn maze outside of town.
I think it was eighth grade.
So eighth grade, yeah. And I don't have a I don't have much memory of the corn maze, and I think the reason I don't have much memory of the corn maze is because when I got there, the Steelers were still playing the Broncos. It was like a late afternoon game, and we were, I think, watching it on some small TV
Yeah.
in the like the big barn that was associated with this big corn maze, and uh, I think we were 2-3 at the time, and this was like it was 2003, um, and we tied it late because Jerome Bettis was like trying to cross the goal line, and his knee fell on, I think, Alan Faneca's like the back, like his calf, and so he would have been short of the goal line, but he, since his knee was on Alan Faneca's leg, he could reach the ball across still and score the touchdown. And then I think we got a 2-point conversion to tie it. I don't remember exactly the details, but we ended up losing on a last second field goal. And I was so distraught, I don't remember anything else from the corn maze. I just remember being like, we're 2-4 now. Like we're done, right? We are so bad. Um, but I have subsequently wondered whether that could be made into a strategy, like whether you could lay people down and have the running back crawl on them essentially, right? And not be counted as down, because it did work on that one. And it seems like it could be explored, right? I mean, I don't know what the possibilities are there, but there's something there. Anyway, that's all I've got. I basically don't remember anything about the corn maze because of, it's one of these cases where a loss is so distressing that sort of the rest of your life is sort of just like, I don't care what's happening right now. Like,
There was definitely something about the Sunday afternoon game as a child. Like, it's fall, so when you're getting to that Sunday afternoon game, it's starting to get dark, and you have school the next day. And if you're someone like me, you probably have some homework that you still have to complete for Monday.
oh yeah, that's the
And
worst.
and you're like watching the football game, and as it's getting toward the end, you're like, okay, like this is literally the last fun thing I get to do this weekend. Like now I have to do work and hopefully try to finish at a reasonable time to go to bed and then
And
go
this
to
entire
school.
week, really, like I'm not going to have fun until next Friday
Yeah,
or
until
something like
next
that.
Friday. Yeah, and then like if your team loses on top of that, like it's just like I still have there's so many emotions that come with that description of like the Sunday, and it's you're usually playing like in Denver or in Oakland or in
And you can
one
see
of
the
those.
sun yellowing in the stands and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah. hmm
and some
Yep.
real negative emotion. And then you lose that game. It's so bad.
Those are experiences like I almost wish I could re-experience that just for like the nostalgia of it, right? Like, it's like there's something to it. The way you describe it,
Because
that's
yeah,
right. Yeah.
it meant
So much
so
happiness
much,
was,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, wrapped up in what was happening there.
yeah. Or like I still remember my feelings when the intro music would come on a Sunday. So like, oh my gosh, like,
Yeah.
and that's probably one of the reasons why I used to watch the NFL Today and those shows. Like, it was just everything was so exciting. And now, I mean, I have different reasons for like we're playing in games that we didn't play in back then, like the title games and Super Bowl and stuff. But it's just weird how like on a random Sunday, how excited we would be. Like I would be so excited to watch football, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a
I
different
feel like
level.
since I feel like I don't know exactly when or if it was a sharp point or not, but I've gotten a lot better at just sort of cutting off. Like once the Steelers lose, it's like, okay, well, I got other things to think about now. I'm not gonna, you know, sit and be sad about it. But the ability to do that really changes like the feeling you have as the game's going on. Like, oh, this is going to be a loss, right? Like it doesn't hurt as much, right? Like, yep, boy, it's going to be a loss, and then I'm going to go do lesson planning or whatever I'm going to do afterward, right? So I don't know. I feel like I've lost something there. I don't know. Maybe it's a good thing to have lost, but I do sometimes. Yeah, as you're talking here, I miss the feeling of like. I mean, it's not a good feeling, but I miss it somehow. I wish I could.
I don't
I wish I could go back and relive it.
I feel like I'm still not that evolved yet. That I've lost. Like I don't think I can like go do work after a game, win or loss actually. Because like if we win, like especially if it's a big game, like because we're playing in so many more like night games and stuff, like especially God, I miss being in California. Like when you're on the East Coast and it's like 11:30 and you've just played a Sunday night football game and you're like then have to mentally unwind. Like for me, it takes like an
Yeah.
hour at least to be able to go. Like you think about going to bed. So like, and if you win, like I'm usually watching Scott Van Pelt afterward, just to like process everything. And yeah, it's I still have a process to go through. And if we lose, because of the worry about us losing, sometimes I will schedule my workout to be after the football game. So then, like, it's like I'll have some form of catharsis. It's some way to wind down, like go run on the treadmill or work out, do something.
Yeah. That's a good idea. But I do know the Sunday night feeling. There's been Sunday night games, whether win or lose, where it's like I can't go to sleep until like 3 a.m. because it's just like I'm replaying the game over and over in my head if we lost, or I'm just so excited about the win or whatever. But yeah, those are rough.
That's the main reason to move to California, man. Like the
It's
Sunday
the
night
main
game's
one.
done at 8:30. Like it's amazing. It's so
Yeah,
good. Like the Super Bowl's done at 8:30 or 9 maybe. Like it's really a weird experience.
that must be strange. That must be
And football starts at 10
totally different.
a.m. So like you wake up at 8, have some coffee, have some breakfast and stuff, and you're almost ready to watch football. It's great.
Yeah, and you don't have to watch the pregame show. So
No.
it's basically over by the time you're awake.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
All right. Oh, and I have one other thing just to piggyback off of your idea about having people lie down and crawl over them. I feel like the cousin of this idea would be if you're catching a pass, but you're short of the line to gain and you're falling while catching it, finding a way to like continuously bobble it so that you can get up and not have had possession when you're
That's
down.
good. Yeah.
Like the reason I think of this is we beat the Broncos in 2016 on a crazy. This was one of those Sunday night games that I couldn't sleep after. But in 2016 we played at Denver, and we needed a touchdown and 2 point to tie at the end, which we got, and then we went into overtime and kicked a field goal to win. And the field goal hit the upright and went in. It was just such a crazy adrenaline like win. It was crazy. And that it was like it was really a turning point for the Chiefs because like in 2016 around that time like we would always lose games like that, like always, and it was weird to get a win in a game like that. Anyway, the game tying touchdown, Tyreek Hill, who was a rookie at the time, caught a slant, and his knee was down at like the half-yard line, but he was bobbling the ball and then fell into the end zone. So they initially called it a catch, and the time ran out, and he was down at the 1, and the game would have been over. But they reviewed it and said he didn't have possession until he was in the end zone. So it ended up being a touchdown because he couldn't catch the ball on initial contact. So there may be something there. If you know you're going down or your knee is down, trying to bobble the ball so that you don't have possession until you're up.
Yeah, that's good. You just do a little like adjustment of the ball. Even if you have it very securely, that's when you can do it. Right?
Yeah.
I like this. We should think of more like ways to game the rules like this. Um, you could always also imagine like people with totally different body types that somehow there aren't rules to accommodate. I don't know. Like if you had a, I don't know. I mean, you can get really upset, but if you had like feet on your head or something, like, I mean, uh, who knows what they would say about that? But anyway, uh,
All right.
what
Well,
what if you had
my
feet for hands? Oh, okay. I mean,
that would be like, what is if your knee is down? Would that still count if your feet were on your hands and you were running on your
yeah.
hands? Elbow down. I
Well,
guess elbow down is down anyway. But anyway, I'll get on to my anecdote. I had said in our last podcast we had talked about the retreat that we used to go on to the YMCA Trout Lodge, and I had told a story about that and said that I had a follow up. And so my follow up is about what I found out happened. You know, we talked about how we would have a curfew at night, and there would be like teachers that would be outside on the big deck, like looking up at the balconies to make sure people weren't like hopping across to go into each other's rooms, and there would be people patrolling the hallways and the main areas. Well, some of our friends have befriended a former teacher who told us what the teachers were actually doing during these times, which I thought was really interesting. So basically, what he said was he and they were two like fairly young, like they must have been. I would imagine they were in their like high 20s probably at this time, right? Like while we were in like 6th, 7th grade. They couldn't have been more than maybe low 30s.
Oh man,
right?
I guess that's right. Just sad because I'm older than they were.
Yeah, I know. We held these people as like such authority figures, like in such high esteem, and it's like we're almost certainly older than they were when we were thinking about them like this.
Yep.
But I think they must have been in their high 20s or maybe low 30s, and so they said that the two of them would. They apparently the Trout Lodge used to give free coffee, and they would keep it in like the main area. So the two of them would keep like filling up mugs with coffee, and they brought Bailey's Irish Cream, and they would just like mix it with the coffee, and they brought a projector and would project their PlayStation up on the wall, and they would just be sitting playing video games in like the main area while they were supposed to be like they were patrolling the hall. And they said they'd just do a sweep every like couple games or something that they played, but they were just sitting up all night playing PlayStation, and that was their monitoring that we were adhering to our curfew.
I mean, that's believable in hindsight. Like that makes sense. You always like, I don't know. I was very gullible and trusting of authority. So I probably, I mean, you said the same thing about being a rule follower last night. I feel like, yeah, I would be. If I had learned then that that's what they were doing, I think I would have been like totally shocked. Like,
Yeah.
They must have just taken a break or something, right? They can't be doing it. Like, they must still be roaming the halls. Right? But yeah, the innocence of naive childhood, I guess.
Yeah. Well, this must have been a PlayStation 2 now that I think about it. That seems about the right time. I don't think the PS3 had come out until later.
Yep. I remember playing PS2 around that time. Never had one, but that's funny. Oh, and it's sad to think of them as younger than me now.
I know. Yeah. Because when you're a kid, your teachers seem so old.
Yeah. They're in a different... They've been alive forever, right? Like,
yeah. And if either of them is listening, we don't think you're old now. We just did when we were kids.
Yeah. Now you're very... Well, do we think you're old now? I don't know. I haven't seen you recently, so maybe if I saw you, I would think you were older. No, it's definitely true that the age at which you think people are old
changes
back.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that wraps it up for 16 episodes. We're getting close to... I don't know. What do we consider a milestone? 25, I feel like, is a milestone. Or do we have to wait till 50?
We should have done something special on like 7 and 15 or something like that. But we didn't think about it. Yeah. 20 is like 100 is. A long ways off.
We'll see if we get there.
Yeah.
I feel like 50 for sure. I feel like, got to celebrate every 50 at the very least.
Yeah, we'll come up with a logo, like the Super Bowl.
Oh, yeah. That's supposed to be gold and just looks like rusted letters on the field.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for listening. We will be back next week, I think.
I think so.
Do you have any conflicts? Okay.
Sometimes I don't see them coming, but yeah, I think so.
So we'll be back next week. We will at one point before the season do a predictions podcast. Very excited for that. And then I think as the season rolls in, we'll probably start doing a little more like week recaps and previews of following games. I will try to, maybe we can do over the next couple weeks, some of our Chiefs Steelers questions be a little bit about like division previews, talk about, we mentioned the Bengals a little bit, and we mentioned the etymology of the Ravens logo. So it was a little bit of an NFC North preview, but if any other NFC North things come up, or AFC North, that's true, we can talk about them. But yeah, we'll be back next week. Anything else to close out?
Thanks for listening. And keep listening if you like it. Or don't. Even if you don't like it, keep listening. We
Yeah.
would love you to keep listening.
Until next time.